The Multi-Orgasmic Millionaire with Tilly Storm is the only sex podcast for high-achieving leaders wanting to experience the best sex and epic relationships of their lives without dragging their partner to therapy, blaming it on their hormones, or trying things in the bedroom that don't feel authentic. I'm your host today, Tilly Storm, top 20 sex coach in the world. I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome back to the Multi-Orgasmic Millionaire podcast. Yes, today, if you have ever wondered what kind of orgasm was that, or I'm not even sure if I've ever had an orgasm, Tilly, how do I know? And how do I know which ones I have had? Then you're going to love today's episode because I'm going to help shed some clarity on the different types of orgasms. How do you know if you're having them? And what orgasm really even is and what it means, because a lot of people's definition of orgasm is very outdated and it doesn't encompass all of women's experiences of pleasure and orgasm. So we're going to dive into all of that today. Before I get started though, if you guys have not downloaded my private podcast training, 5 days to epic sex and pleasure for high achieving women, then I highly want to encourage you to go do that now. Because if you are new to this podcast, or if you're just tuning in and you've just found me and discovered the treasure trove of amazing content and knowledge here, then if you could take my 5 greatest episodes, the 5 things that I most want to share with you, that is what is in my 5 days to epic sex and pleasure for high achieving women training. And it is a private training. You do have to opt into it. So I highly encourage you to go do that at the link in the show notes. And you're going to get the whole rundown of everything I'm about and everything that I wish I could tell you if I only had just a little bit of time to be with you. So go do that now if you haven't gotten it already. All right, now let's dive into how to know what kind of orgasms you're having and if you've ever had one at all. All right, can we just answer the first question of have I ever even had an orgasm, Tilly? All right, to answer that question, it's important to understand what orgasm even is. The way that I like to share about what orgasm is that there are really 3 main components that make up an orgasmic experience, or what people would consider to be an orgasmic experience. And the sad truth is that the orgasm, the way that we think of it, has been mapped from a male experience, which means that it's a male model and it doesn't translate to women's experiences per se in the same way. And the male model is just okay, you feel pleasure, it builds up over time, and boom, fireworks, ejaculation, right? And for women, it can be very different. It's much more nuanced, okay? And for women, the definition of orgasm, the 3 things that get to happen in order to consider it an orgasmic experience is that, yes, there has to be some experience of pleasure in the body. And then the pleasure, step 2, has to expand in that area. So it has to build. And then eventually the 3rd step is that some sort of mind state shift gets to happen. Usually that's a mind state shift of feeling that you could surrender to the pleasure that you're experiencing, feeling that, okay, I can relax into this and feel this and let myself experience this. And there's some sort of moment where your mind just goes blank and you're not really thinking, you're just experiencing and feeling. So that's what I mean by a mind state shift, is that it's no longer being in your cerebral cortical thinking brain. It's where that part of your brain feels like it's gone totally offline and you're in a different world. You're in a different land, the orgasm land. So this is my definition of it, because this helps women who don't exactly experience a friction-based orgasm, but do experience more full body or energy type of orgasms. It does help them understand that they actually are having orgasms, because it's not just about a friction-based experience. So let me back up and define 2 different kinds of orgasms. I have done 2 podcasts episodes on the 8 different types of orgasms and why you're not having them. You can go type that in your search. And I don't remember what episode numbers, guys. I've been doing this for 6 years now, so I can't remember all of them, but I did do 2 episodes on this. And it's one of my most highly downloaded episodes, both of them, because everyone wants to know about, different types of pleasure, different types of orgasm. Yes, I want that. Okay, but how do you know you're having them? All right. So there are 8 that I can clearly define and talk about. There's really an infinite number of orgasms that can be had. But if I had to define them, I would say that there are 8. And within those 8, there are 2 different types of orgasmic experiences. The first is a friction-based experience, and the second is more of a non-friction-based experience. So the ones that would include friction-based experiences are breast orgasms, anal orgasms, cervical, A-spot, G-spot, and clitoral orgasms. So the 6 of the 8 are more friction-based. And then you have the other 2 that are energy and full body orgasms and throat orgasms that don't necessarily need to be friction-based. And those are very, very, very different types of experiences. And women can have energy orgasms, but they don't really fit into that male model of the orgasmic experience that we're kind of all fed. So a lot of women end up being very confused of like, okay, well, yeah, maybe I have experienced an energy orgasm. Maybe that is what I experience all the time, and I just didn't know that was really an orgasm. So making sure that we're all on the same page about what orgasm even is for women is very important, because a lot of the women that are like, I don't even know if I've had one, that is because our definition kind of sucks. So I'm giving you a new definition to adopt and to really think for yourself, oh, maybe I have experienced that before. Because a lot of women who say that they haven't had an orgasm actually have. And that's the truth. So let's go back to, have I even had one? Okay. Well, if you haven't experienced that sense of surrender or some sort of mind state shift into another world or another land, or like where your mind shuts off, I would say you probably have not had an orgasm. If you can't pinpoint a time where you felt like you could fully surrender to the moment and to the experience, then that's probably because you haven't. With the friction-based orgasms from the vaginal canal, so this would include the G-spot, the A-spot, the clitoral, maybe not so much the cervix, because I have not experienced pelvic floor contractions with the cervix, although there is a potential that it could contract. The cervix itself could contract when you orgasm from your cervix. I don't know, because I've not been in there like doing my own research around that. But I would say that for the friction-based orgasms from stimulation of the clitoral area, so that includes the A-spot, the G-spot, and the clitoris. If you don't know what the A-spot and the G-spot is, then go listen to the episode on the 8 different types of orgasms. And please join one of my programs, because if you don't know this basic information, then you are not experiencing near amount of the pleasure that's actually available to you. And it's very clear, if you don't know what I'm talking about right now, that you have not received a decent pleasure education, and you need to be educated. So with that said, the friction-based orgasms from the clitoral area, you know you will have them if you experience pelvic floor contractions, where your pelvic floor muscles, your PC muscles, the vaginal muscles, they contract spontaneously. So if your partner, or if you're using a finger inside, if you are in an orgasmic experience and you felt that pulsation of your vaginal muscles, then that is an orgasmic experience. And that's what most people define as orgasm. So many women think that if they have not experienced those pelvic floor contractions, then they have never had an orgasm at all. And what I am telling you is that that is not necessarily true, because you can have orgasmic experiences that are not pelvic floor contraction related, because there are these different types of orgasms that have nothing to do with your pelvic floor, like a throat orgasm, an energy or a full body orgasm, even a breast orgasm. So with that said, maybe you have had an orgasm and you didn't even really know it. So let's move on to the types. How do you know if you've had these different types of orgasmic experiences that I'm sharing about? Many women get really tripped up. Like they want to know, they're so analytical. They're like, I got to know which ones I'm having. You don't have to freaking know what kinds you're having. Like, girl, just enjoy it. Like there's no point of trying to like get it down to the nitty gritty. I got to make sure I check all the boxes and make sure I've had all the orgasms before I can get my A+. All right. This is what so many women do. So if that's you, just understand, like, I know you want to check off all the boxes, and also it's not totally necessary and chill your tits because it's not that big a deal. Like most women and most men don't even know that you can have all of these different types. So it's not like you're going to get a freaking trophy for checking all the boxes and having had all the orgasms. There's no award for that. So it's like it's not a big deal. All right. You don't have to like have it figured out. So just take that pressure off, because that's what I find with women. They're like, oh God, I need to know if I've had all the types yet. Because like, it's almost like they want an award for it and they want to know. But it doesn't matter in the end. Like if you're having them, freaking great. Like, do you need to make sure they are clearly defined at all times? You really don't. But if you're wondering, in case you are wondering how to know, the best thing is to just go through them and be like, well, have I ever explored my anus? How do I know if I've had an anal orgasm? Well, did you experience pleasure that builds over time and that resulted in a mind state shift? If you could say yes to all this, then yep, you did. Great. Checkbox marked. Okay. Same thing with breast. Same thing with cervical, all of them. And that's really all there is to think about. Did you experience pleasure that built over time that resulted in a mind state shift? If yes, then you have had an orgasm from that way before. And if you don't know or aren't sure, then that means you can go explore and find out for yourself. And that's really it. So there's no reason to get all tripped up on which types of orgasms am I having. Many women will be like, I don't know if it's A spot or G spot or cervical. Well, do you really need to know? It's really, if you're having them, just allow yourself to enjoy them. But if you want to get all technical, then you got to like pinpoint the location. So if you're just doing G-spot stimulation and you experience the pleasure that builds over time that leads to a mind state shift, then great, you had the G-spot orgasm. If you want to explore your A-spot and learn about, how do I know if it's an A-spot orgasm? Well, it's the same thing. Isolate the area, only touch that area, and then you'll find out real quick, right? So some people with the A spot, it can be confusing because it will be through penetration, and they'll have an A spot orgasm, but they're not sure if it was because the clitoral network was being stimulated on the outside and that facilitated the A spot orgasmic experience. The answer is yes, because blended orgasms exist. So with the A spot, it can be tricky because sometimes in order for the A spot to orgasmic experience to take place, it'll happen a lot easier when the outside of the clitoris, because the clitoris is very large, it goes all the way internal around the vaginal canal. But the outside part that you actually see, if that's being stimulated while penetration is happening, but you know that orgasm was not just a like vulva outside clitoral orgasm like you would have with just oral sex, and it was like way more intense, way better, then it's very likely that you were having an A-spot stimulation, A-spot orgasmic experience, because there was so much more of that clitoral network around the A-spot that was being stimulated and activated. So it sounded like when women ask me about that one in particular, it's usually that yes, they are having the A spot and the clitoral orgasm at the same time, because you can have these blended type of orgasmic experiences. That would be the most confusing one for the most amount of women, from what I hear women ask me about. And then the cervix, like, have you experienced a cervical orgasm? Well, that one's pretty easy to isolate, like the G spot. G spot, cervix, pretty easy to isolate. If you're just using like a standard glass dildo with the A spot, or you're using a penis with the penetration, and you are just hitting the cervix over and over again each time, and you experience the pleasure that builds over time that results in that mind state shift, then you could say, yes, that was very, like, the cervix, the difference between the cervix and the A spot is the cervix isn't going to require any clitoral stimulation at all. The cervix is like way deeper, way more, oh my God, something just hit my soul. Like, I felt blown open. It wasn't like a fireworks sensation, but it was almost like I just surrendered to the experience, and it opened up this whole portal of like another reality of orgasmic experiences. So it doesn't feel like a fireworks sensation that a clitoral orgasmic experience would elicit, because the cervix is very, very different. It's not like that all of a sudden, fireworks, it's like more of like, holy fuck, something just touched my soul. And it tends to last for hours and even days afterwards. And you'll feel that. And it's the moment you think of it, you're like, oh my God, yeah. Kind of like a plant medicine experience, if you've had any of those, where you do one of the quicker ones like DMT or something. It's quick. And if you think about it, you can remember the experience and remember what that felt like in your body. You're like, holy shit, man. Like, that took me to another world. That's kind of like the cervical orgasm. So just remember that if you're curious what kinds of orgasms you're experiencing, you aren't sure what kind you're experiencing, if you want more clarity and you're really set on figuring out which checkboxes you can mark, which, like I said, you're not going to win a freaking award for it, but I understand the curiosity. If that's you, then you want to isolate the zones. So if you're trying to figure out if it's an A spot orgasm, then just see if it's possible for you to orgasm without touching the outside of your clitoris at all. And that could elicit an A-spot orgasm. Or you could play around with the blended orgasm and notice the difference between just clitoral stimulation and then clitoral stimulation with deep penetration along the A-spot. And for the G-spot, it's very easy to isolate. And the cervix, I would say, is fairly easy to isolate as well. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, please go download the 5 Tapes to Epic Sex and Pleasure for High Achieving Women training, and go listen to the episode I did on the 8 different types of orgasms. And hopefully you will get a little bit more of background information on these different types and what you are experiencing. So I hope that satisfies your curiosity and gives you something to work with. So isolate the area if you can. And if you can't, then just freaking enjoy the experience and stop worrying about it. And just celebrate that you're someone who's having more orgasms than most people even know about. Okay. So let's just celebrate that. All right, guys, thanks so much for joining. And I hope this helps you more clearly define things and have some clarity on that. So we'll talk to you next week. All right. Bye.